individual, unique and special. Okay? Would any rational person have said that building a new hospital through private finance initiative, or building a new school through private finance initiative, which ends up with an education service and a health service virtually tenants in what were publicly owned and run buildings, and paying through the nose to companies sometimes that have outsourced their activities to tax havens as a way of funding public service development? Would they say that's really a very sensible way of running things? Most people wouldn't buy a house on a credit card. They would try to get a mortgage at the best interest rate they could. Instead, private finance initiative is a bit like building a new hospital on a credit card, and you don't even own the hospital when you've paid it off. Surely we can and should do things differently. So with real transparency in that decision making, it would be very, very different. Democracy in the economy and economic decision making is also very central to much of this. And I'll come on to this a bit later as well. Democracy means an economy that works for all. It means devolving decision making, but it also means that everyone at work has a right to representation by an independent trade union, a right to organise into a trade union. This isn't magic, far-left extreme stuff. This is actually in the International Labour Organization Convention, signed, I believe, in 1919. We are in breach of it. So it is about trade union rights. And it's about democracy in our own party and in our own movement. Because we have to be held to account for what we do if we're elected into office in the party. We also have to make sure that every member of the party has their rights, their right to participate, their right to vote, their right to be heard, their right to propose policy, their right to put forward the ideas they want. That is not a weakening of leadership. It's not a weakening of our party. It's not a weakening of our democracy. Nothing could make it stronger than the anti-participation of the 500 million people that have joined our leading to a membership of well over 500,000, makes us the largest socialist party in Europe. I think that's something to be very proud of. For those that say we're not developing enough on policy, we put out a 10-point plan, a 10-point idea. They're open for development, they're open for consultation, and we've had thousands of emails in reply, sometimes in criticism, sometimes suggesting changes or improvements, but above all, there is a level of interaction and involvement. So we start with rights at work. That's why we've set up Workplace 2020, which is looking at the rights of work of people struggling to survive on zero-hours contracts, struggling to survive in unorganised and often quite dangerous working environments. If anybody thinks this is all, well, a bit unnecessary in modern Britain, I urge them to look at two companies, or three actually. Look at BHS, look at Sport Direct, and look at Deliveroo. For example, and then you will see the need to end the iniquity of zero-hours contracts. Then you will see the need for full recognition of trade union rights. Then you will see the need for a living wage that means that people can survive on it. We don't have a living wage in Britain at the moment. We do have towards 1 million people on zero-hours contracts. We have many, many more whose stress in life, real stress in life, is that their inadequate, insecure, often unpredictable wages don't provide them with the money they need to pay their rent, to feed their children, or to live anything like a normal life. What we have is growing inequality in Britain, with greater concentrations of wealth at the top end and burgeoning poverty at the other end. Not right, not necessary, it has to be challenged. Nowhere is this more obvious than in the housing crisis that faces Britain at the present time. I represent a constituency not so far away from here, and the heartbreaking problems of housing, of a private rented sector, some of which is very badly managed and very badly maintained, all of which is quite expensive, means that those on any kind of average or below average income then face a benefit cap, which means they cannot remain in the relatively high-cost areas of London. They're then forced to move. And because they're on 6 months assured short-hold tenancies, they might be moving every 6 months. What does it do to a child growing up knowing they don't really have a home? They have a place for 6 months, they might go into a hostel for a few months, they might go into a short stay somewhere else, they might have moved schools so many times. Talk to a child who's changed primary schools 4 or 5 times before the age of 8 and ask them what they feel about security of life. And then our government tells us that all that matters is local authorities in high-value areas, most of which, but not all, are in London and the South East, must sell off valuable council housing when it becomes vacant through death or somebody legitimately moving on. And then, at the same time, saying that those that do relatively well have got to pay to stay and end the whole concept of lifetime tenancies. Can't we do something a bit different and a bit bolder and recognise that the post-war housing crisis was dealt with by a government that was bold enough to build council housing and built it again? And at the same time, regulate the private rented sector. And it seems that regulation of the private rented sector is a bit of a problem for the Tories. And so when one of our Labour MPs, Theresa Pearce, proposed an amendment to the housing bill, which was actually so short and moderate, I thought it was going to go through unopposed. All it said was, any property put out for rent on the open market should be fit for human habitation. It's not a big ask, is it? You know, it's pretty simple, and the definition of human habitation is also fairly predictable and quite easy to understand. Too much for them, no, 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 no. They voted that one down. That is the kind of government you're dealing with. That is the kind of opposition we're dealing with, and that's why we have got to get on the front foot and say to everybody, we will invest in the housing that's needed. We will regulate the private rented sector. Other policies we have, other speakers have mentioned the value of our National Health Service. I just want to say a couple of things about our NHS. It was the single greatest achievement of our party and our movement to establish a National Health Service free at the point of use in 1948. To show that healthcare was a right, not a privilege. It's not a right that is enjoyed by most people around the world. And Nigel Van always said it will last as long as there are folk around prepared to defend it. Well, we're around and we're going to defend it. But at least it's under threat in a very clever and actually quite subtle way. Very clever and very subtle, because even the Tories say, health, NHS, it's absolutely safe in our hands. Indeed, I do even recall Margaret Thatcher saying as much, and I've heard every Tory Prime Minister and leader ever since then saying it's safe in their hands. Then look at the Health and Social Care Act. Look at the requirement of outsourcing almost half of all NHS services to the private sector. Look then at the underfunding. Look then at the debt levels in every hospital, and look at the drain of PFI on those hospitals, and you begin to see a pattern. Underfund, longer waiting lists, longer waiting times. And then, when the junior doctors stand up for their conditions, for their rights, and for the NHS, they receive the equivalent of all those who think they shouldn't be doing that. Well, let's look at things a bit differently. Look at the stress levels of those that work within the NHS, at every level within the NHS. Look at those that are porters in hospitals, racing around, trying to keep up and catch up with whatever's going on. Look at stressed out nurses and triage nurses in A&E departments. Look at exhausted and stressed out doctors dealing with A&E crises every night of the week. And then look at the stress levels of those on the ward trying to cope with the patient demand. Things then end up going badly wrong. Let's not blame the NHS staff. Let's look instead at the issues of funding of our NHS, rights of those that work within the NHS, and the way in which PFI drains so much that ought to be spent on patient care and support. Inequality within our society. You could take a bus down Kilburn High Road, start at the top end, start when it's no longer called Kilburn High Road, but it's still the A5, go further out into Hertfordshire. Go further out and you'll find people, some living very good lives, some people have a long life expectancy. They lead a good life, they're well housed, they're comfortably off, they're likely to live longer. You go down the A5 towards central London, life expectancy falls and falls and falls. To the poor living in Golborne Ward in Kensington, Chelsea, the Royal Borough of Kensington, Chelsea,